thank you very much. This is working, right? I'll just start by introducing how I got into this project. I was asked to do research around or in the book Rapport by Larsen, in order to collect material to present in this exhibition, and it's what has been what has turned out to be the archive section of the exhibition. So I was first introduced to the book itself, which you've probably seen, the Aarhus Rapport 1961 to 1969. And what I was presented to then was a very long list of names of events, dates, exhibitions, works, title of works, and I was also introduced to an excerpt of this chronology of the report by Lars himself, an excerpt looking very much like, this is just a part of it, a list again, which this curator thought would be interesting to include in one way or another in the exhibition or in the archive section. So just to begin with, I think I was a bit confused. I was also very curious to find out what was actually behind, what stands behind these names, these events, these dates, exactly how to unfold the coordinates of this report. This said, I will step back and just show and present you to an example of a work which is mentioned in the report. I'm sorry for the quality of this graphics, but it's a graphic score drawn by Erik Liljenberg, who was also mentioned by Tania, and the music is composed by Ole Buch, one of the composers and founders of Aarhus Young Composers. And the recording stems from a concert situation at the museum, then in Mølleparken here in Aarhus. That's another story. It's been very difficult to find out where exactly all these venues mentioned in the book are or were, because all these places have changed names, or at least Aarhus Art Museum has changed location more than once, and also Aarhus Art Building has not been a venue for only exhibition of art, but also for exhibition of furniture and a lot of other things. So I was trying to tell you what I was presented with at the beginning, this book, the Aarhus report, and the coordinates, so to say, my points of reference was limited to the internal ordering of the report, chronology of dates, titles of works and exhibitions, and the artist names. And from there, I had to expand the system in order to figure out where the things, the objects, documents mentioned could be now. In moving from the book, from the report and out, I have, of course, run the risk of simply copying or doubling this archive, which you may label the book as. And when looking at the archive section, if you go into the exhibition and look at what is presented there, it's also kept very much in the spirit of the report. You will see many things that are also documented there, and not very much that comes from outside. And I think, exactly as I said before, one of the very first impulses for me was to try to just find out what these things actually was, and how the single documents mentioned within the book were connected. The graphical score and the music recording seen together is one example of this, trying to find out how things are connected, because the graphic score is within the book. Erik Liljenberg unfortunately died this year, so I haven't had the opportunity to talk to him, but I had the opportunity to talk to Ole Buch, the composer, and he sent me this CD with copies of the original recordings. And then from there, I found out that one of the tracks on this was in music to graphics of Erik Liljenberg. And then I remembered, okay, well, we have graphics in the report, so actually I can present these two different representations of the same event in the archive or in this exhibition. So this has also been my attempt to actually reenact the synesthetics of the events documented, instead of just having the report as this format of the book. Because the format of the book, of course, turns everything into the two-dimensional space of the page, and everything is scaled to fit this format in dimensions, but also in status of representation. That is, newspaper clippings appear next to press or documentation photographs, again appearing next to posters, programs, and summaries from seminars and meetings. Very different kinds of material are presented in the same at the same platform, so to speak. So I think you can characterize this Aarhus report with the rhetorical figure of the Zeugma, which is a taking together of very different material belonging also to different genres, and therefore conventions and expectations on how to read them. And this, of course, is a result of the report actually building on the premise to document what has been labeled hybrid art or mixed media art, without taking into account a question of quality or hierarchy, which would then be the art historian approach. So now I'm coming to the question of the anarchival or the archival. And I'm focusing very much on this concrete Aarhus report and this exhibition, and not doing a whole conceptual speech on anarchival practices as such. But as I see it, the Aarhus report project, we could say, has 4 different but related anarchival traits. The first one has to do with the character of the archiving institution, which doesn't exist, hasn't existed, and still doesn't exist. Because to some extent the report is a product of the work of this art association of 1847, who published the book and who were, who was an association responsible for a lot of the exhibitions and events taking place in this building, but not conflated with the building. So say the association and this building have had a very difficult history, or a very interesting but also complex history of sorry, I'm going where I can't really explain myself, but to some extent the report is a product of this art association, but this association has not been an archival institution. And that's very important in this case, because this means that they have not kept documents. They have not kept works either, but they have not kept the documents that represent or document what has been taking place in this building. And this goes for all the other self-organized associations as well. Being self-organized, they have not been archival institutions as such. So none of them have been building the archive, because there has been no building, there's been no archaeon. Instead, the documents and artworks are disseminated into various institutional as well as private collections, with each their different archival principle. One principle also being the active forgetting through deleting all material from that period of time. I called one of the artists who were engaged in a lot of the exhibitions and also the publishing of the book, and asked him whether he had any material left, original drawings, anything that could maybe of interest to this exhibition, and he just said, well, I threw it all away. And he didn't find it interesting at all to talk about the 60s, because he had moved a long way from what he was doing then. So this is one of the archival traits, and I would just like to quote one of the founders of what you call classic archival theory, just as an opposition to this anarchival. In the archival, the archives came together and reached their final arrangement by a natural process. They are a growth, almost you might say, as much an organism as a tree or an animal. A single document out of a group of archives is no more taking as expressing in and by itself all it has to tell us than would a single bone separated from the skeleton of an extinct or unknown animal. Archive quality only survives unimpaired so long as this natural form and relationship is maintained. So this dissemination of documents is really the opposite of an archival or organic ordering. Oh, sorry, I'm doing this all the time. Well, the second archival feature or trait of the report and this project is related to the first, as it has to do with the archiving principles of those archives and collections where the documents are now placed. Some of these archives are barely described and certainly not publicly accessible, which means that you still have to rely on the remembrance of people in order to access the memory that the archive is. An example is, this is a poster from a concert at the Conservatory or the Royal Academy of Music in Aarhus from 1967. And again, in one collection or in one private archive, I found this poster. And I also found a program from this concert. And then by contacting some of the composers, I found the original scores and also recordings. to listen to all of this. Okay, I think I made that point very much now, that things have been in very different collections or archives, but this about the remembrance and the memory is also connected to the idea of the network, I would say, because talking to one person and looking in this private archive has really led to other people, other persons in their archives. Well, contacting Aarhus, for instance, to borrow an experimental film by Teddy Sørensen led to, well, why don't you contact the photographer Paul Pillersen, who's still alive and living in Aarhus? He has a lot of stories to tell, and you could probably borrow some photographs from his private archive. And this is an example of the accessibility and the difficulty of challenge coming from the inside, moving from the inside and out, moving from this book and out without having inventories or well, records and metadata. You would say there's no digital archive where you can actually retrieve this material that is still there. So this having to rely on human memory and not just the memory of the archive stands in opposition to at least a digital archive experience, as also described by German media theorist Wolfgang Ernst, who says that a necessary precondition for any data retrieval is addressability, the necessity of being provided with an external or even internal address. So this addressability, at least, is still missing for this archive that we are maybe building or about to build. Yeah, I think I need to speed up a bit, I'm sorry. The third archival feature of this project stems from the reenactment, you could say, reordering or rewriting of the archive being done by, well, the historicizing of specific artworks through art history and also through the exhibition history of these original artworks. Because the status of these works and the exhibitions mentioned in the report actually comes after the fact, meaning that some works have been included in important collections, whereas others have been entirely excluded from art history. And also the hybridity and intermediality of several of the events from the report has been dissolved and instead differentiated into the respective disciplines and traditions, which is art, music, literature, etc. This is a challenge to the archival notion of provenance, the principle that the system of arrangement must be based on the original organization, as well as it poses challenges to the urge to distinguish between the original and the reproduced material. The fourth and last feature is the obvious one of the non-representation of persons and events, the silence beyond the limit of the archive. It has been my attempt to fill out some of the gaps in the report with explanatory documents in the archive section, but again, building mainly on the report as an inventory, perhaps a key to the archives. It has not been, well, the right approach to actually compensate for what has been archived. So this said, it may also be unreasonable to attempt to read the report as an archive or even an inventory, when it is actually rather a catalogue of a certain kind of art projects at a certain time and a certain place. But yeah, I think it makes sense still to reflect on this report and the material that it presents from an archival point of view, not least because the archive section of this exhibition could be the first step towards describing this non-existing archive by means of writing metadata to each document and attempt to localize these documents within an extended coordinate system, a network of private archives, museum collections, biographies, articles, etc. So, I'll have to end here, but maybe end with a more comic experience. This archival or this self-organized notion of this whole Aarhus report, of course, has also led to there's one comic story that is, I thought I had found a reel-to-reel tape of documentation from the George Brecht performance from 1968, and the collector thought that that was what was on this tape, but when I had it digitized, it appeared that it has nothing to do with George Brecht. Instead, being a private document of travel to Paris. Just to say, when relying on people's, human memory, it's not always that reliable.